Brother John, come on up.
Everybody, please welcome John Perkins.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
So, John, you're going to wow everybody again. I have to say, watching your presentation yesterday, I was just amazed at how you do this so naturally. Yeah. It's like you do this every day. Yeah. It is amazing. You have such an incredible stage presence. I'm looking forward to how you follow on from yesterday and engage all these people who I know want to just have tons of questions and dialogue with you. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Joel. And Jordan, if you're still here, thank you so much for organizing this. Yay. Joel. And yesterday it seemed so natural because yesterday I was a hologram up here. Today it's the real me. Aha. So I thought it would be nice to start today with a little shamanic journey. So let's all get really relaxed. If you're sitting, well, you're all sitting. You could lie on the floor if somebody wants to. But just really relax. And let's all take a deep breath together. I want to really hear it, another one. One more, deep. And then just allow your body to totally relax. Letting go of all your muscles. Letting go of all your thoughts, totally out of your head into your heart. Letting go of all your thoughts, all your ideas, perturbations, whatever those are. Let go of them. Just go into your heart. And focus on your breathing as it comes up out of your lungs, around your heart. And on your out breath, just allow your consciousness to go out to everyone else in this room. And on your in-breath, bring in your feeling of connection with everyone else. Breathing out your consciousness with the room and everyone in it. Breathing in your connection and your love, accepting the love of everyone in this room. And on your out-breath, sending out love, consciousness, love. Feel it in your heart. Feel it at your deepest cellular level. Feel it down there in those protons that Nassim talks about, Assam. Feel it very deep, this connection with everyone in this room. And now on your out breath, let your consciousness go further out to this town, to the people, the plants, the animals, the earth itself, everything that's around us here. Feeling the love, your love for all of that and its love for you. Going out with your consciousness and bringing in your connection on the in-breath. And let that continue. Let your consciousness go further out, perhaps to wherever you come from, to family or friends, out to the whole earth. Pachamama. Pacha in Quechua means mother, it means earth, universe, everything. It's a very quantum idea, as well as indigenous, that it's all one. So let your consciousness continue to go out as far as it wants to go, maybe out to the edges of this universe and into the next universes and on, wherever it wants to go. For the next few moments, just really allow your consciousness to go out to that greater Pachamama and feel the love and bring it into you and send it out. just place your hand on your heart and feel what you're feeling. And as you do so, allow yourself to slowly come back into your heart, your body, deeply feeling whatever you're feeling. Just really feel it. Be aware of your breathing. And when you're ready, start to be fully conscious of your body and the chair that you're sitting in, or whatever you're doing. If you're standing or sitting on the floor or lying on the floor, feel your physicality, this beautiful body. Start to move your fingers and your toes a little bit. And when you're ready, open your eyes and look around at all the other beautiful souls, spirits that are part of your clan, your tribe. Ah, another big breath. Ah. Whew. So that's what I learned as an economic hitman. How are y'all feeling? All right. So, what? Oh, good. Me too. So, I wanted to start with a little story, which is another true story, and then we're going to go into just opening this up to all of us. But so a number of years ago, I was deep in the Amazon rainforest in this schwa house. It's a lodge. They're beautiful. They're oval-shaped, very big thatched roofs, just beautiful in the middle of the jungle. It's a really nice feeling. And I was living with the schwa. I just started living with them. And they get up very, very early in the morning. And one morning I got up very, very early with them, and I had a little transistor radio with me. So I turned it on. I put it next to the fire in the center of the lodge, and I turned it on. And up in the Andes, there's this powerful radio station called El Voz de los Andes, the voice of the Andes. It's a missionary radio station, but it plays really good Quechua music in the mornings. You know, this great, like the condor music type of thing. And so I turn it on and blast out this music. There were about a dozen people in the family in the lodge, and they all ran immediately out and hid in the forest. And I was a little shocked. I just sat there and listened to the radio. I just sat there, listened to the radio. And after a while, the man of the family, who was a shaman and a noted warrior, he came in with his spear, and he's looking very kind of embarrassed because I'm sitting there listening to the radio. He's the shaman, he's the warrior, and he's run into the forest and hid. And then he comes in with his spear, and he goes up to the radio, and he taps it, and it keeps playing. And so he hits it a little harder and knocks it over, and it keeps playing. So he sits down next to me we're sitting cross-legged with his spear across his lap, and we just sit there for a long time listening to this radio. And finally, he turns to me and he says, "Okay, tell me the secret. How did you get all those men and those instruments in that little tiny box?" Perception. That's the only perception he had, is if you've got music, you've got men and instruments making the music, right? So I explained to him that there's this tower up there that sends out these waves, and this little box can receive these waves and turn them into the same music that was played up there. And he looks at me and he listens very carefully, and then he goes about the rest of his business for the day. Then the next day, he comes up to me and he says, "I've been thinking about that little box there." And he says, "That does just exactly what we shamans do. All the waves, all the information is out there. We just got to tap into it and receive the information." And I think that's, what this conference to a large degree has been about. It's certainly what, Nassim is teaching and so on. There's this huge consciousness out there. This is the paradigm change that we're going through, that we all know on some level what the information is. And today we're going to talk about what we each can do, what you can do to turn things around, to move from a death economy, from a failed system to a life economy. And it's really moving into a new consciousness. I don't want to just make it about the economy, because it is about consciousness, and that'll change everything. Because we've all been brought up in this consciousness of maximizing profits, of being better, of getting the best marks in school, or the most goals in a soccer game, or whatever the hell it is, you know, the best clothes, the biggest car, the best job, the most money. We've been brought up in this idea of more is better, maximization of profits, however we want to look at that, even about more love. You know, I've got to get more love from somebody, because if I don't get their love will go to someone else. There's all these concepts that have become part of our perception, part of our consciousness. And so to move into this new period of a life economy, of a love economy, of a successful system, it's about changing that consciousness. And it really is about opening to the waves, this information that's out there. Nassim this morning was talking about the morphogenetic fields that Rupert Sheldrake talks about. I was with him recently in London. And we know that where does this all come from? You know, when you think about it, just take a moment now and think of somebody who's not here with you right now, but who you deeply care for, love. Just get an image of that person, or cat, or dog, something. All right, so where did that image come from? You don't have a file in your brain that's got all these photographs in it. There's no album in there. Where does that image come from? Where does a thought come from? You know, the word inspiration means to be in spirit. It comes from classically what we might call spirit, but it comes from out there. It's there, and we can retrieve all this information, and we've all got it. It's there. So the point I'm trying to get at here is, as far as what you can do, and this is important, that we all have such an important role to play in moving into this new epoch, this new consciousness, that we call it a life economy, a love economy, whatever we want to call it. It's moving into a new period of being human, of humans being human. And you have a role to play in it. Indigenous people tell us that every one of us is born at a certain time in this particular body, that we have many lives, but we were born in this body at this time, to the parents we were born to experience the things we've experienced, because we have a mission. And I was not taught about mission. I don't think most of us are in our school system. We're taught about goals, you know. Get good grades, go to a good school, get a good education, find a good spouse, have good children, make sure you're good children, get a good education, get a good job, so on and so forth. Goals. But in indigenous cultures, there's this idea of mission. Why did you come here? Why are you in this body at this time? Why are you in this room at this time? Because you have a mission that's connected with this period of time, which has been prophesized in prophecies around the world as being a time for the opportunity to move into a higher level of consciousness. And so I think what we each need to look at is, what is our passion? What is your passion? So we know that we must all strive for this goal of a new consciousness, a new way of living, whatever we want to call it. I'm going to call it a love economy today. I called it a life economy yesterday, same thing. How do we get there? And each one of us can take a separate path. We don't have to take the same paths. Your path must be that which most appeals to your heart, to your bliss. It'll bring you the most joy. And so I think I'd just like to open this up now to discussion or questions. And they've asked that we use these, I guess there's one microphone over here, so that it gets recorded on camera. I'm sorry, I'd kind of prefer to be able to pass the mic, but we need the camera. So somebody, don't all jump up at once, but And I'm happy to go into some of the things in my book, The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I have these long lists of what students can do and what retired people can do and what parents can do and what executives can do. And I'm happy to go through some of that, but I'd like to first just hear a little bit from some of you. What are you thinking? What are your questions? What are your ideas about what can we do to move into this new era? We've got people over here. Man, those spotlights are really bright. Yeah, so, and please say your name and then...
Hello, John.
And let's try to keep each person to one comment or question, not a whole series of them, and we can then go back and do more if we want. But yes, hi.
Hi, John.
You are?
I'm Curtis Kidwell.
Curtis, hi.
Bullseye
Curtis.
Media, and we're doing the interviews here, and if anybody would like to come continue the conversation,
Oh, I
please.
forgot. I was supposed to do that, wasn't I?
Yeah, that's right. We got an appointment with you at the dinner break. We were talking last night, and you wanted me to remind you to talk about when you were poisoned and how that affected. And I'm making a documentary film about extraterrestrial disclosure, so I have some valid concerns about the safety of myself and my family. And if you could talk a little bit about that, you're going to put something like this into the world to be safe. How much fear is prudent? What's the best way to do this? And I was also curious, in that story, it happened right before you were going to speak to the UN. Did you get to speak to the UN? Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Curtis. Okay, so I didn't want to make this too much about me, but to hear about me being poisoned. And yes, I did get to speak to the UN about 9 months later, so the story goes back further than that. When I stopped being an economic hitman in the early 80s, I started writing a book that I was calling at that time Conscience of an Economic Hitman, and I wanted it to be an exposé, so I contacted other people who had jobs like mine and jackals, the ones who go in and overthrow or assassinate governments. I started contacting them because I wanted to include their stories. And immediately I received anonymous phone calls threatening my life and that of my infant daughter. And I took them seriously. Two of my clients had just been assassinated, Jaime Roldos of Ecuador and Omar Torrijos of Panama. I knew what these guys can do. And at about the same time, I got invited out to dinner by the president of Stone & Webster, a big consulting firm in Boston that had been my company, Charles T. Main, where I'd been chief economist, was a major competitor of Stone & Webster. I'd left Charles T. Main. This president invites me out to dinner, and he says, "You got a great resume." I'd had 50 people on my staff working for me. I had a very successful organization at Charles T. Main. He said, "You got a great resume. We'd like to use it in our proposals. You won't ever have to do any work for us. Just let us use your resume in our proposals. And I'm prepared tomorrow morning to write you a check for $500,000 consultant's retainer." This was in the 80s. $500,000 was worth a bit more than it is now, and it's nothing to sneer at these days. And he said, "Just don't write the book. You can't write that book, obviously, and be part of our business." And so my life is being threatened. My baby daughter, Jessica, who is now 35, her life is being threatened. I'm being offered a legal bribe. There's nothing illegal about what he was doing. It's consultants' fees are paid like that often, not usually that much. So what would you do? Pray. I took the money. And I have to say in self-defense that I did not buy a big mansion or a lot of fancy cars. I put the money into going back to the Amazon, where I'd been a Peace Corps volunteer. I financed a new career, basically, and I went back to the people who'd saved my life. I told that story yesterday. And I said, "Hey, I understand your rainforests are being destroyed. You saved my life. You changed my life years ago. I want to help you now." And they said, "Well, that's nice. But if you want to save these forests, don't come here and try to change us. We're not destroying the forests. You are. It's your oil companies, it's your lumber companies, it's your cattle ranches, it's your dream. Because you in the North, as they put it, have had a dream of big buildings, heavy industry, lots of cars. And whenever you have a dream and you give energy to it, it materializes. That's the perception. That's that perception bridge I talked about. You have an objective reality, which is, rainforest. And if the perceived reality is we want more cars, we want more oil, we'll take it out of the rainforest, then you get an objective reality which destroys the rainforest. They're saying change that, cross over that perception bridge from this reality to that reality, make this reality one that loves the earth. So they said, change your dream, change the dream of your people. So I went back and formed a nonprofit, Dream Change, which, as I mentioned yesterday, please go to our website, dreamchange.org. We have this beautiful love summit in Cincinnati coming up in October 12th, for business people. I'd love to have you participate in it. We can always use donations also. And out of that, a few years later, grew the Pachamama Alliance, which many of you are very familiar with. That came out of Dream Change, and it took a slightly different route, but very similar about changing the dream. We have the Awakening the Dreamer program at Pachamama Alliance, which is now in about 85 countries, I believe. It's all about changing the paradigm. So I came back to the United States after that trip, formed Dream Change, started doing workshops, writing books, getting the message out there. And I wrote 5 books on shamanism long before I wrote Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Shape-shifting, The World is As You Dream It, Psychonavigation, Spirit of the Schwa, so on. That was fine with Stone and Webster, that I wrote those books. And everything was copacetic, it was fine. And then I was deep in the Amazon on 9/11. Take a group of people in there. We were there during 9/11. When I came home, I went to ground zero. And as I stood there, looking down into that pit that was still smoldering, I knew I had to write the book. I knew I had to come clean on what I did. And it had been tearing at my heart. Even though I was doing good stuff, I was using Stone and Webster's money to do good things, it needed to be expressed. But I decided at that moment that I wouldn't tell anybody. I would not write an expose. I would write a personal story, a confession that would just be mine. And I had 5 books published. I knew the routine. You write a proposal, you get an advance maybe, and then you get the book. But I didn't do that. I wrote the entire manuscript, completely in secret. I sent it out to a bunch of publishers, thinking as soon as I get it out to the publishers, it's my insurance policy, because the jackals all know that if they kill me, I've got a book now out there with publishers, sales are going to skyrocket. They don't want that to happen. So I see this book as my insurance policy. 39 publishers rejected it. 39 rejection letters. Try getting that someday. It's like, oh my God, another one? And then this one firm in San Francisco, Barrett Kohler, agreed to publish it. And they were not doing too well financially. They published this book, and the second week out, it went to number 4 on Amazon. Then it went on the New York Times bestseller list and stayed there for a year and a half. So it went into 33 languages. You know the story. It sold millions of copies. Amazing, And then eventually Penguin bought the paperback rights from Barrett Kohler, so it became a paperback book. And then Random House hired me to buy. So all these companies that had rejected me before suddenly, okay, well, he's making money. let's go for it. So now the book's out there, and I'm thinking I'm pretty safe because no serious jackal is going to want to hurt me, because that's going to sell even more books. And then I have this experience where I go to New York, and I told the story yesterday, right? Yeah. So I go to New York to speak at the United Nations. I have lunch with this journalist, and that evening I'm bleeding profusely internally, rush to the airport, ultimately have 70% of my large intestine removed. And aside to that story, I was very lucky, because I was staying with an old friend who I'd known since high school, and she was a producer for Tom Brokaw's NBC News. I was staying with her that night, so she was out in the park feeding squirrels, and I was in her apartment in 5 minutes losing more than half the blood in my body. She came in with my literary agent. We were going to go out to dinner, and finds me on the floor in a state of shock. But a good friend of hers was Pavarotti's gastroenterologist. Now, you got to be damn good to have some guy who weighs about 500 pounds fly all the way from Italy to have you look up his butt, you know? And so she calls him at home at like 7:30 at night. And she hands the phone to me, and he says, "Oh, you wrote that book, Confessions of an Egon? I love that book. You got to sign it for me." And I'm like, "Wait a minute." And then he says, "Oh, my God." He says, "You'll be dead in an hour and a half. We got to get you to Lenox Hill Hospital. Get in a cab. Don't take an ambulance. They take too long. Take a cab. I'll call ahead." Make a long story short, I spend 2 weeks. I have 70% of my colon removed. Checking out as I leave New York to fly back home, I was living in Florida at the time, I'm in his office for the last meeting, and he says, he's a very enlightened guy, did a lot of reading, and he says, "I should be telling you right now that I've just taken you from being an omnivore to being a carnivore." He said, "Herbivores have very long colons. Carnivores have short ones. Omnivores have something in between. When you came here, you had 7 feet of colon. I took 5. And so you've really got a carnivore stomach, colon. And I should be telling you not to eat any more vegetables or salads or the roughage kind of, and I would be telling that to normal people." But he said, "While you were in the hospital, I read your book, Shape-Shifting. And you've got 25 feet of small intestine, of which the last 5 feet doesn't serve much function except to connect to the large intestine. You still have that. I think if you practice what you write about in your book, Shape-Shifting, you can shape-shift that 5 feet of small intestine into large intestine and eat perfectly normal." At lunch today, I had 2 very large oatmeal cookies, not to mention a lot of salad. I eat perfectly normally now. I did shape-shift it. I have no question about that. I don't know whether it's shape-shift physically. I haven't had anybody tell me for sure, but certainly energetically and consciously, I am perfectly normal. At least in that regard. My internal system seemed to be normal. So, the story, I'm sorry, that was a very long answer to your short question, Curtis. But I would say, how do you protect yourself? Well, I tried to do that by keeping the story secret until it came out. I don't believe the person who poisoned me was a jackal. I don't believe he was CIA or represented the corporatocracy or anybody else, because it did sell a lot of books once I was in the hospital. And I think he was probably a fanatic. And as I look back on him, he was a very strange character. We tried to find him afterwards. All the information he'd given us, it was irrelevant. We couldn't get in touch with him. So I think he was a fanatic. And what I really want to say is, if you've got something to say, as you do, Curtis, and I'm sure many of you in this room do, and you may be fearful, and I've talked to a number of other whistleblowers, if you've got something to say that you think is important but you're afraid to say it, realize the damage that's doing to you internally. Holding it in is the most dangerous thing you can do. It can cause cancer. It can cause heart attacks. Who knows what it can cause? Stress, we heard yesterday, is one of the greatest causes of serious illness. And so you got to get it out. You got to get it out. And you got to get it out for future generations, too. It's not just for you. It is for you, and it's for everybody. We got to get this information out there. Once you decide to get out, try to be as cautious as you can. Like, don't threaten. Hey, I'm going to expose you. No, because then they can come after you. That's what happened to me the first time I started writing the book. Instead, get all your ducks together, get all the information out there, get everything ready to go, and then put it out. So it's too late for anybody to stop it. And once it's out there, I do think it's your best insurance policy. I had an unfortunate incident with a person I think was a fanatic. But I think that is. So be careful how you do it, take care how you do it, but do it. Otherwise, it'll come back to haunt you. And what's life? You know, I work with indigenous people, and I'm totally convinced that the spirit goes on. You know, we've lived former lives, we'll live future lives, maybe not as humans, but whatever. So don't be too concerned, and enjoy getting it out there. Revel in it, dance with it. Okay, I think that's enough on that question for now. Is that good enough? Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
John.
Your name?
Catherine Green.
Catherine. Hi.
I live here in Ashland. I kind of fled the East Coast from the overdevelopment and the conceptual way that everyone was living, in a sense. I see them waking up now, but it's been a pleasure to be on the West Coast where there is a little more consciousness, it seems, or more information readily available. Your book was a revelation to me. I could never figure out why the third world was in such trouble. Getting those truths out there to everybody who's doing that, I think we are not aware of what we're supporting until we really know the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of how these systems function, right? So for me, that was a big, huge piece of the puzzle, and I hope more people do what you did on every level. And I also know from my spiritual and environmental work and working with animals and plants, it is a co-conscious universe we live in, and it's a realm of infinite possibility. And so I totally agree with let's change the dream, particularly for us, I call them younger civilizations, the mechanistic Western world, and to dream a more holistic dream. But the question I really have for you is, to get this connection for most people is very hard. That there are these two sides, right? There's the mechanical, what's happening that supports this something that I can't even call it human. It's not humane, what we're doing to the world and to other nations. I don't feel it's human. And I'm kind of curious what you and the shaman feel. If it is just simply human ignorance, blindness, greed, and closed hearts, or if it comes from another level as well, and how much our holism, just our mindsets and our choices and our dreams, can shift that.
Thanks, Catherine. Thank you. Thank you. It's not human. I've spent enough time in indigenous cultures to know that, you know, they're about community, and I don't want to idealize indigenous cultures. Let me start by saying that they have crazy people, they're violent people, they're human. But what they have that I really deeply respect and want them to share and want all of us to buy into is this deep, deep respect for the earth and for all living beings. And that includes stones, they're living beings. That includes the earth herself. The spirit of it all. You know, I love this word inspiration, being in spirit, feeling the spirit of everything. Another word I really love is imagination. You know, that's what I take people on shamanic journeys and they'll say, oh, that was great, but it was just my imagination. Well, what's imagination? I think the word comes from I magus, I the magician, I the shaman. Going into that realm, that the radio, that the shaman understood, the waves that are all around us. And so, you know, I think as we look at where we go from here, we understand that it's the human aspect of us is deeply about love, and it's about community. And getting to your question, that in indigenous cultures, again, I don't want to idealize them, but in addition to this deep connection with the earth, they have a deep connection with each other. So in most all the ones that I've lived in, the ones that are still keeping their traditions, if any human being, if any member of the community is suffering needlessly from hunger or lack of food, lack of water, lack of clothes, lack of housing, lack of love, everybody in the community suffers. So you just don't let that happen. Now, someone may be suffering because they've got a physical condition that nobody can do anything about. They'll try. But if it's anything people can take care of, they will. And so we come from a very different perspective here. It's that perspective of beating out the other, the pie, the bigger piece of pie you get, the better, and it's less for everybody else. They don't look at it that way. I don't think it's human to look at it that way. That's new. That comes out of the age of enlightenment. Isn't that funny? Let's get enlightened and buy into materialism. It actually goes back before that, way, way back before that. But it's about our materialistic view of the world, that more of this is better, more of that. And materialism is very seductive. One of the funny things I notice when I take groups of people to be with indigenous people, and again, I'd love to have all of you join one of my trips. Go to johnperkins.org. I also do a great writers webinar that's coming up in May. If any of you are writers, it's a community. We've limited it to 24 people, so it's a real salon. So anyway, go to my website, johnperkins.org. Take a look. When we go into these indigenous communities, we immediately feel the incredible connection, the love that comes out, and yet they will sometimes look at things like a watch. That's a beautiful watch, and they'll trade. They'll want to trade a watch for a belt like mine, Here, I'll give you my watch for this. But then I go back a couple of months later, the watch is gone. I don't know what happened to it. It was a trading item. It was fancy, it was cute, it was clever. Now it's probably, who knows, it's in the river, or maybe they've traded it for something else, someplace else. Maybe it's back being sold as a pawn shop in the nearest community. Who knows? But they don't hold on to it. Materialism just isn't important. They've developed, people say that the indigenous cultures haven't developed. That's totally false. They've developed beautifully, spiritually, in a view of consciousness, and many of them, like the Kogi in Colombia, where we take people who call themselves the Older Brothers. These are people who lived in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Now that area is a UN heritage site because it's the only place in the world where mountains go directly from the Caribbean, or from an ocean, in this case the Caribbean, straight up to 18,000 feet. Glaciers up there, and the rivers which we swim down, we take those rivers down in tubes. We go down, and you go down this river that's fed by these glaciers. It's warm by the time it reaches us, and you go right into the Caribbean. It's an amazing place. But the Kogi, when the Spaniards came, they went way up. They'd lived at around 1,000, 2,000 feet. They went up to 15,000, 16,000 feet and stayed there until a couple of decades ago. When their shamans, they have very powerful shamanism. Their shamans had these visions. They saw the glaciers were melting. They had these visions that they are the elder brother. They understand how to take care of the earth. They needed to come down and teach us, the younger brother, how to steward, how to love the earth. And so I've been close to them for some time, and my Ecuadorian partner who I do these trips with, Daniel Cooperman, he and I have been close to them, and so we take groups to them every December to learn from them, to form bridges with them. And again, what we learn is that for them, materialism just isn't important at all. They have the opportunity to move into the cities to live our lives, and they don't do it. They still live in their thatched huts and so on. So I just say that it's not human. It's a perception that we've bought into, and it can be very, very seductive. And it now goes into this death economy that I talked about yesterday, where the success in business and everything in life basically is measured by numbers, and in maximizing profits, getting more A's, getting the best degree in a best college, et cetera, these numbers. But the maximizing profit one is the one that we really must turn around, that all of our efforts, all of our businesses need to be oriented toward community, toward public service, what this country did for the first 100 years, to making a better world. Yes, we need to pay investors a decent rate of return. That's how we get investors. But that money that's invested should be used to invest in a life economy, an economy that cleans up pollution, regenerates destroyed environments, creates new technologies that don't dig up the earth. And we each can participate in that. And if the question doesn't come up, I will get into got plenty of time left still, some specific things we can do. But it's not about materialism. That's not a human trait. I'm totally, absolutely, 100% convinced that that's just a perception. It's something we bought into, and it's something that's promoted by this system over and over, and most of us promote it ourselves, too, to a large degree. It's time to move out of it, though, isn't it? Yeah. It's something much more beautiful. And you know, it's funny because when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, when I first went into the Amazon, I'd studied a little bit these Schwa people I was going to live with. I'd read the World Bank report said they were the poorest people, or one of the poorest people in the world, because they had no money, no currency whatsoever. I got there and I found people who were living amazingly beautiful lives. They have plenty of food. Yeah, it was squirming white grubs. It wasn't what I considered, it wasn't Cliff Bars. Of course, there weren't any of those back then anyway. But it was very nutritious, as I came to understand living with them. And they had great communities, lots of love in their communities. And so I discovered that the most impoverished people in the world were actually extremely prosperous on another level. Thanks for asking, Kate.
My name is Karen McKenna. I'm Canadian. We drove down here. Anyway, the issue that I've decided to focus on is central bank reform. So right now I'm in Canada. I'm working with Paul Hellyer on the central banking, trying to modify it. Running into a lot of problems, not being able to get progressive economists. And I feel that a solution, although Canada has a unique opportunity because we have a public bank, which we're not using, but that it needs to be a global movement and that we need to create something like on the scale of Thrive, but focused on that one issue and recruit progressive economists and try and really get people to understand it's quite complex. So I just wanted to understand wanted to ask you if you thought that was a good idea, or do you think that any ideas you have on that?
Well, thanks. It's a great idea. Yeah, the banking system really sucks. It's in many respects, it sucks money out of all of us. It sucks soul out of us. And the Federal Reserve System. But there are alternatives. We're seeing that, you know, North Dakota's kind of the famous, the bank there that invests in local things. There's someone in Texas. They're growing. The local community banks. My great uncle was my grandmother's brother was a president of the bank in Waterbury, Vermont, a small town, and he used to drive me around town when I was a kid and show me this house here, this business here that he financed, that he made possible. And he used to say to me, "I'm partners with all these people. If somebody can't pay their mortgage, if they run into trouble, it's my fault. It's my problem. The president of the bank. I got to help them." And this was the old system. And this was not uncommon not so long ago. And we always had robber barons in the late 1800s, but there was always that integrity. And I was taught, you can trust your banker. If you went to a banker back when I was, you know, getting started in business, if I had gone to a banker and said, I don't even know what the prices were then, but in today's terms, if I said, "Hey, I want to buy a $500,000 house on a loan," the banker probably would have said, "Oh no, I think $300,000 is more what you can afford." He'd run the numbers. He'd say, "We'll give you a loan, but it's going to pay $300,000. You can't afford a $500,000 house." And in recent years, that banker now would say, "Why don't you go for $700,000? You'll have to tighten your belt for a little while. But that house is going to be worth $2 million soon." And then the market collapses, and the bank, you know, takes back the house and repackages it and sells it again and again. And we've seen, you know, we can't trust the banker. And of course, I discovered that was what we were doing in the economically developing countries. When I was an economic hitman, was, you know, telling them they could take out these amazing loans from the World Bank to build hydroelectric plants and industrial parks and things that basically bankrupted the country, and then we owned it. So that goes back globally, internationally, but it's recently, you know, since around 2002, 2003, leading up to the 2008 financial crisis, the bankers just couldn't be trusted anymore. Most of them. But there are exceptions. And so, as far as you're concerned, I think I don't think you should start globally. My recommendation would be, start locally, like the Bank of North Dakota. Maybe go down and spend some time with them, find out how they're doing it, get it in your community. There's a lot of community banks really starting this movement now. It's happening, and co-ops, amazing stuff. And I think it'll be easier to do it on a smaller level. And taking on the Bank of Canada is probably a little difficult till you've established a model. But do it. Don't give up. Never give up. Just do it. and enjoy every minute of it. Set it up in a way where you're really, really enjoying it. I guess are you still over there? Yes. Yes, do it in a way where just make it fun. Do go and talk to the bankers in North Dakota that had a great experience with this. They're having fun with it. And, move out there. Get in touch with my friend David Korten, a great economist who's written a lot of great books. He's a neighbor of mine. I can help you get in touch with him. He's big on that Korten, Korten. And there's a whole movement around that. So, yeah, make it happen. This is your passion. This is in your heart. And you're not going to be really happy until you really move in that direction and make it successful. You are going to make it successful. My book was rejected 39 times, and then it became a big-time bestseller. That's what you're going to do with the banking business. It's your passion. Follow it. Go for it, and have fun. And see and I'll help you if there's any way I can. David Korten would be a bigger help, though. Ellen Brown, excellent. Yeah, she's a friend too. Ellen Brown, public banking. Thank you. Yes. Anybody else got any ideas? Throw out as people ask questions. Yell it out. What? What are charter banks?
Well, just a little piece of history. Between 1939 to 1974, Canada did use our public bank to use government-created money, and we got out of the war and we funded our infrastructure investment. So we are one of the few countries that actually have it on the books to use it. It's just that we adopted monetarism in 1974 to comply to Milton Friedman's school of thought with the Bank of International Settlements, and now our debt's is like trillions. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Good old Milton again. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Hi, my name is Michelle Marie Engel.
Hi, Michelle.
And I was a public school teacher, and what I want to talk about is a solution, a two-part solution, and one is minions to masters, which is what you're doing and what I'm doing, because your conscience kicks in and you realize you're a minion and you're doing something that doesn't fit a value system of integrity, and then you quit and you move on to something else.
What did you call it? Moving to masters?
Minion.
Minion to master.
Minion to master.
Like
I
that.
was a public school teacher in a technology department. I did grade school, middle school, high school, and then community college. And I quit because my conscience kicked in when they wanted us to promote the H1N1 swine flu shot, and I was aware of the ingredients, and I didn't want to be used for an inculcation activity. So everything I worked for, my degrees, I was a single parent, but my conscience was stronger, and I quit my job and my career because I was not going to push those vaccines. Now I'm an author. I've written It's a New World After All, poetry and prose to inspire a new world vision. I'm creating an education program called Follow Your Heart Education based on inspiration. And
I love it. Thank you. That's fantastic. Good job.
Thank you. Focusing on solutions once again. This right here is part of it, coming together in unity and sharing these ideas. But to make it exponentially more powerful, if we could share intentions and hold that vision together and sustain a vision, this really works. This is physics. It's not miraculous. It's just understanding and applying physics. And we are the technology. We are the light of consciousness. We can bring these visions into reality so much faster if we share the visions together, because our abilities have become latent and have atrophied because we went into victim consciousness and ruled by fear. We're back into conscious creators motivated by love, together in unity. So in that, I'm actually producing events besides educational books and programs. And my next event is called The Rock of Spiritual Perception, because that's where we get our connection, the internal connection, which inspires our conscience to do what we did and to move forward to create the new paradigm.
Do you have a website?
Yes, it's www.smile4love.com, smileforlove.com.
Great.
And so it's here in town, April 19, 5:44 at 8 o'clock. It's the 5th of a series of 12 events that I'm producing. They are all meant to raise consciousness and to bring the power back by first using group consciousness and shared visioning, which I already have testimonial stories. It works. We can do it. We're empowered right now.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, John. My name's Guy.
Guy?
Guy.
Guy.
Yes. Thank you for sharing your life here.
I hope I don't actually have to do that. But I tell you what, if one of you takes me out at the end of this session, my publishers will probably be happy, so you might get a bonus. Anyway, let's keep moving along here.
All right. So I'm interested in your unique perspective, kind of living on both sides with indigenous people, and as well as a very grounded view of how our society works in a real world. One of the things that's come up is some of the part of this offered solutions for a new paradigm. Some of it it's gone more toward kind of the Ayn Rand philosophy, and I've heard a lot about that, kind of like everything has to be privatized and everything has to have an economic value. And although I see the value of that incentive, and it makes a lot of sense and it works in a lot of places, like Joel brought up that the Oregon coast is all public land, and as opposed to, say, California, you can walk the entire thing. It belongs to the public, actually. And one of the things I heard in the last session is like, well, that's impossible. We can't actually have commons, that everything has to have this economic value, and then people are going to back trade and forth, and if something's not perceived to have just quite enough beauty as something else, then, okay, we'll sell that part of the coastline or something like that. And I'm curious about your perspective of the commons, and even a step beyond that, which always kind of rattles me personally from growing up in the society, is how much is private ownership necessary? And you have some unique perspectives on that.
Yeah, thank you. Having been an economic hitman working for private corporations, basically that's what we did. The World Bank is a shell for private corporations. The U.S. government we've created an empire. It's not an American empire, it's a corporate empire. And I think, and what I saw was often when we gave World Bank loans to countries, they couldn't pay them back ultimately, so the IMF then goes in to restructure the loans, and one of the things they demand is that the country privatize its public sectors. Its energy sector, its water sector, the famous one in Cochabamba, Bolivia, where Bechtel took over the water system and prices of water increased by 4 times, including they started charging for water that people were taking off their own roofs. I think privatization can be extremely dangerous. And, there's always this dilemma between big government, good government, bad government, and privatization. I don't think those two, I don't think government and, I don't think the issue is, should it be government controlled or privately controlled? I think the issue is, how well is it managed? And I've seen way too many abuses in the private sector. And I'd also say that our civil servants have to take an oath to protect the civic, we the people. Private corporate executives essentially take an oath to maximize their profits right now. Salute. And who would you rather trust with the commons? Somebody who's committed to maximizing profits for a small group of wealthy people, or somebody who's committed to taking care of the public? Now, we have problems with civil servants sometimes. People say, well, they're just not as efficient, they don't do as good a job. A lot of that's because they're not paid as much. Or a lot of that's because they're not trained as well. But those are structural problems that can be overcome. And maybe you're the one to help make that happen. To really get in there and look at how do we do a better job? And the teacher that talked earlier, how do we do a better job with our teachers in our school systems? How do we do this better so that we really have a class of people out there that's looking out for the public interest? And I also think we can do a better job at getting corporations to do this so that all demand that the corporations that we buy from, that we support in whatever way, buy from, work for, manage, invest in, that they serve a public interest. I think that we can move in both of those directions. All of it has to be aimed for that. But I have to say that, and you probably heard on the panel last night, I was very skeptical about having police forces and fire departments and many, many other things that are privatized, because I've seen that private system abused terribly around the world. And I've seen when I as an economic hitman went in and told governments, presidents of countries, that since you can't pay your loan, you're going to have to privatize your electric utilities. You're going to have to privatize your roads. You're going to have to privatize your water and sewage systems. You're going to have to privatize your banks. We go in and we told them this, and immediately things went to hell and high water, you know? It was always much more exploitation. So suddenly the big corporations came in and took over these things that had been considered to be public property before. And in almost every case where that happened, it got worse and worse and worse for the majority of the people. And the rich got richer and richer. They participated in that. So, you know, I'm not one that favors more and more privatization by any means. And yet, I think what's happened today in the world is capitalism, in its strictest definition, is defined as a system whereby the means of production and commerce are not owned by the government. That's capitalism. So little markets in the Andes, those are capitalistic markets. What we have today is not really capitalism. We have what I call predatory capitalism. And what we have today is a system that's the opposite of capitalism. It's a system where the means of production and commerce are not owned by the government, but those who own the means of production and commerce own the governments. And that's really terrible. So we've just taken this whole spin around. So it really isn't about capitalism. That word is used very incorrectly for the most part. We have a lousy form of capitalism today. And we have a mutant form of capitalism, predatory capitalism that's created this death economy and controls governments. And that's really, really dangerous. I would rather see governments controlling the business than businesses controlling the government, frankly. But there's some territory in there that we haven't really explored very well yet, but some of the European countries have explored, some of the Latin American countries are exploring. There are other systems out there that we really need to look at. So, privatization. Well, I think I've answered that question. Yes? Let's move on to the next one.
Can I real quick? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I think a more accurate description of what we see today, based on the founder of fascism, Mussolini, is he defined fascism. Fascism and Nazism are not the same thing. They share qualities, but they're not the same thing. We have the combination of the corporate state together. That's what fascism is. It's
Yeah.
a combination from the state and corporations, and there's no doubt that that's what we have today.
Yeah. You could call it,
I think predatory capitalism, of course, exists as a mechanism inside, like the space, but we have fascism. America is a fascist country to a large degree.
you can call America. Thank you. Thank you. I don't use that term because I do a lot of work at trying to bring corporations around. I work with a lot of corporate executives, and if I want to lose a corporate executive, I call him a fascist. I don't do that. That's true. That's true. Right. Fascism is the combination of the state and corporations. You're right. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. But I am also, it's a real trigger word. So be careful how you use it. Thank you. Yeah.
That was great, thank you. And thank you for having the courage to speak your truth. It inspires my own. And please forgive me as I gather my thoughts, because I have a pretty strong adrenaline response and a fear of public speaking. But using the toroidal model, I've got this perception that through the heart of our economy is basically an oil pipeline. And the use of oil has inflated the human process of existence. There are more people on the planet alive now than at any other time in our known history. So there seems to be this dependence on oil, and with what Faster Gamble was talking about this morning, the potential of this economic rejuvenation. Some people call it a collapse, but I've adopted a view of being more accepting of the process of death. That's been somewhat of a comfort when dealing with these kind of dark issues. And also, I just wanted to mention, anyone local to the area, the LNG pipeline is a threat to our local region. But one thing that struck a chord for me was this axiom that was given by the Buddha. And I was hoping you could just illuminate my understanding of this. Overcome greed with generosity. Overcome anger with loving kindness. Overcome ignorance with understanding. How does the acceptance of death give us the courage to practice love in the face of such poison?
Thank you. I think the Buddha answered it. Thank you. I don't think I can do any better than what you just read from what the Buddha said.
I think you have a lot to say about how we can overcome greed with generosity, and I'd love to
Well,
hear.
that's the life economy. It's, it really is. We need to move into an economic system that values generosity, that values the public interest, and we can do that. It's right here. It's happening. It is happening. It's beginning to happen. We're seeing it. The Love Summit that I've mentioned, the Dream Change does. We've got a lot of speakers there, a lot of businesses that are buying into that, that are becoming part of that. So generosity is a love economy, the life economy. It's being generous to ourselves. It's being generous to future generations. It's being generous to the planet. So, that's the short answer. There's a longer answer, and it's in the New Confessions of an Economic Hitman. But I won't go into that, and I'm looking at, we've got about 25 minutes left, and I do want to get into some specific things too. So I would ask them if we can go through quickly. We've got about 5 people there, so let's see if we can move into that quickly. Thank you.
John, when you give presentations to firms in Wall Street and Silicon Valley, what's been the receptivity to your message?
Good question. I keep getting invited to these things. So they either just think I'm incredibly strange and entertaining, like the Schwa did when I was back talking about credit savings co-ops, or they're getting something out of it. But what I hear over, it's probably the former. What I keep hearing from executives is that they do get inspired, that they understand. I mean, because I hear over and over, our audiences are smart. These guys, CEOs, know that the system isn't working. They just don't know how to get out of it. They're just, like I said yesterday, they're afraid that if they lose 0.5% of market share, they'll lose their jobs and then be replaced by someone who only cares about market share. So it's up to us to get that message out there to every corporation that you buy from, every corporation you have something to do with. Let them know. And the internet makes this so easy. Social networking makes it so easy to get that message out there. This is how we'll change the world, because it is the corporations that control the world. By whatever name, fascism, corporatocracy, whatever we want to call it, they control the world, and they're made up of people like us. And I want to just quickly, so I've talked about executives who want to make change. There are also sociopaths. There's no question running corporations. They are not driven by profit. They're driven by success. And today, success is measured by profit, so they are driven by profit. But if we turn that around, if we start putting on the cover of Time and Fortune and all our other magazines and on their television shows, the people who run this conference, for example, and the people who, the leaders in business who are moving toward a life economy, rather than the ones who are making the biggest profits, the biggest bucks. If we stop glorifying Gates for making however 85 billion or whatever he makes, and then giving 35 billion to philanthropy. I mean, you know, screw the world, rip everybody off, and then give some money back. Let's not glorify that anymore. You know, we've got to start glorifying the other things, and then the sociopaths will turn around too. The sociopaths will become the greenest people on the planet if we make green the symbol of success, the measurement of success. So we need to turn that around and redefine all of that before I fall off the stage. It's these, you know, it's these charts. They always get in my way. I've spent too much of my life on charts. Now I don't use them anymore, and they're striking back. All right, moving right along here.
Hi, John. My name is Colette, and I came all the way down here from Montana to buy your book, Economic Hitman. I'm probably the only one that's ever read it, but I hear your story, and I've heard it.
They don't sell it in Montana? It's
I
been
came
banned.
down to
I'm
get
banned
a
in
signed
Montana.
copy.
We're not selling it here.
Anyway, I know you through my own spiritual path, which is shamanism, for the last 15 years, and I am most curious about how your practice of shamanism informs your daily work.
Oh, thank you. Totally. Shamanism teaches that all we got to do is change perception. It's easy. We can change the dream overnight. Change the dream, and we change. Here's the reality. We change the dream. The perception. We create a new reality. And so I know that we're, you know, on the verge of doing that. All the consciousness around the world, everywhere I speak, where I see people really waking up. And the shamanic forces are at work there. And it's the same thing that, you know, the quantum physicists are talking about, this, you know, this morphogenetic field, this connection that our photons have with the universe and all the universes. This information is there, and we know through shamanism that all we got to do is tweak it a little bit, change the dream, change the perception, and everything changes. So if we just tell this new story, that the economy we all want and we're all going to insist on is a life economy, instead of a death economy, we'll get it. And we're on the path. It's happening. It's underway now. The tide has turned, but we need to keep pushing it. And shamanism, to me, it's people say, well, I can't believe you write these books on shamanism and you do write books on business. They're so disconnected. They're totally connected, totally connected. It's all about having a new dream and applying energy. And when you apply the energy and you take action, things happen very quickly. Thank you, wherever you went.
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm a farmer in the Applegate. I came from my past life of being a corporate product designer to becoming a farmer and mom, much better path. And I'm not a historian, and I'm, you know, a novice on many levels. My question also has to do somewhat with the shamanic tradition. And the thing I'm coming to recently is just feeling like so much of our modern Western culture is the repercussions of the lack of shamanic tradition and the lack of, you know, ancestral shamanic healing. I feel like we have thousands of years of trauma and damage that hasn't been healed, and how that's affecting us as our society and how we move forward in that. And if, you know, your experience with indigenous cultures where that healing is taking place on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis with everybody in the community, versus our Western culture where there are communities, there's people, there's families that have trauma that is many, many generations back that has not been resolved, and how we get to a place of healing in our culture and access that.
Thank you. It's a complex question. Let's first look at, so what is a shaman? And my favorite short definition is that a shaman is a woman or a man who journeys to other worlds, which we did at the opening of this session, incidentally, and which you do all the time whenever you're bringing in a thought, a prayer, a meditation, a thought, an idea is coming from someplace out there. So a shaman journeys to other worlds intentionally to retrieve power, wisdom, and information to use in effecting change in this world. A lot of people journey to other worlds. Like I said, we just did it a little while ago. Priests, meditators, yogis, all kinds of people journey to other worlds. We all do it all the time when we get thoughts. But a shaman is a person that must use what he or she gathers from those other worlds to affect change in this world. And that can be healing other people, or it can be affecting change in a culture. So, strictly speaking, any one of you who leaves this room today and goes out, draws on that information that's out, goes into your heart to understand what it is you want to do to make things better, whether it's changing the banking system or changing the education system or whatever it is, and then goes out and you do it, and you use what you're pulling in here, you're a shaman. Now, you haven't been trained as a Shwa shaman or a Quechua shaman or a Shipibo shaman. You don't have that kind of training, but you are practicing the purest form of shamanism. And all over the world, shamans I've studied with in Indonesia, in Iran, in Egypt, all over Latin America, in many different places, that's the basics. You learn to travel to other worlds, channel that power, wisdom, energy to affect change in this world, and then you learn the techniques of that particular culture. Fire blowing, preparing a plant, or whatever. In our culture, there's many different ways to doing it. Go out there, draw on that knowledge, affect change, and you're a shaman. I dub you all shamans. Raise your right hand and take the shamanic oath. I will go out there. I will draw upon the powers of the universe. I will bring in the energy, wisdom, and power, and I will affect change that makes this a better world for me, my children, my grandchildren, and all sentient beings upon this planet. So help me, Pachamama. All right. Thank you. That was fun. Okay, let's not add any more people there. We're back to 5 a little while ago. So, yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Peg Anderson. I've been approaching politicians in Northern California about the use of public state and county land for use by homeless people in sanctuary camps or tiny house villages, and I haven't been effective at all. Neither has anybody else in California. We have closed state parks. We have, there is land. There's a huge amount of land where I live, and homeless people have nothing. They're on the street. They have no place to go. Who would you suggest I approach about this? Should I be going to corporations? And also, a question is, why is this such a huge blind spot in a national conversation and among politicians in general? They just don't talk about homelessness.
Yeah, it's a tragedy. It's a shame upon us,
Yeah.
It really is. And I don't have any personal experience. Maybe there's other people in this room. What was your name again? And
Peg Anderson.
And you're going to be around? So what I want to suggest is maybe just stand at the doorway as people are leaving, and if there's anybody here who has any experience with homeless, I don't personally, but I think, they'll come. And my experience is you get the word out as you're doing, and it'll come, and it's a beautiful, beautiful cause. And I think the homeless people have a great deal to teach us.
Oh, no kidding, yeah.
Tremendous power out there, tremendous wisdom on those streets. I've talked to, and I make a point of it I'm always amazed at the poets and the artists and the people that are out there too. And then there's the ones that are just really in trouble.
Right.
You've got both, but God bless you, and I'm sorry I can't offer anything more, but...
Right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth, True Twin. And I think it's wonderful, the consciousness raising that we're doing, and we're integrating all these new concepts. And it's my feeling that there's one thing that's going to help us cross the bridge where we can get to solutions. I don't think we'll get to solutions without this. I've been working for formal disclosure from our governments about the extraterrestrial issue. And what it means is that our governments have been engaging with extraterrestrials and not telling us about it. It's called the truth embargo. The truth embargo suppresses our science, energy systems, banking. Catherine Austin Fitts says that we have an off-planet economy. And I think that when we have a formal disclosure and we get together as a critical mass issue and face that when we get to the other side, everything will be able to be reformed of these ideas that we're dealing with here.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I have a confession to make. Another one. And I wrote about it in Shapeshifting a bit. And I'm writing about it in the book I'm working on now, which is called Touching the Jaguar, which is a concept that comes from in the Amazon, where they say on a vision quest, if you're taking a plant substance or you're doing any kind of a vision quest and you see something that scares you, and often for them it's the jaguar because it's a very scary animal, but also very powerful. If you see something that scares you, you must go out and touch it, and then it'll give you its power. If you run from it, it'll chase you. And we're in a situation like that now, I think, in our lives, where we're a little scared to go out there and touch that jaguar. We're a little afraid to touch this system because we're so ingrained in it. We know we must change it, and it's chasing us, and we've got to touch it. But what the confession I was going to make is that in this book I talk about an experience I had a number of years ago that I did write about in Shapeshifting, not a lot of detail. And then when Confessions came out, I became very quiet about it because I wanted to get into the corporate community. But I took a ride on a blue globe in the Amazon that came down, what we would call it a UFO. And they're seen all the time in the area in the Amazon where I go. And one night, I was transported in one. And I write about this in Shapeshifting. You can buy that book. Probably not if you live in Montana. But, but even in Montana, you can get it on Amazon, I think. And what was fascinating to me, and what ties in with so much of the current conversation, is that the next morning, I was staying in a shaman's house that night, and I was sleeping, and I got up and I went out, and anyway, I went on this ride where I was shown human history and the history of human domination of other humans. And at the end, I was met up with these 13 women and who gave me this very, very strong message about about my own role and what I needed to do to change this. It was a remarkable experience. The next morning when I told the shaman about this, he said, "Oh, yes, you know, we do that a lot here." and he said, "You know, that blue globe, that was Kitiar." Now, Kitiar is another shaman that I'd written about who a number of years earlier had been one of our teachers, and I'd taken many groups, and one time when I took a group to him, he predicted that he was going to shapeshift into a bat. This is getting pretty wild now. And leave, and actually he did. Never showed up again as a human being. Nobody ever saw another sign of him. He just disappeared. Never showed up for a meeting he was supposed to have with us. His son the next morning told us Kitiar had headed out to see us and said, "Tell John Perkins that I'm doing tonight what I said I would do." And that night when we were waiting for him in the shamanic lodge for him to come in and do ceremony with us, he never came, but a big bat came in and flew around and around and around. Kitiar never was seen again. And that's extremely unusual. So the shaman now, after I do the Blue Globe ride, who knew Kitiar and knew that he'd been a teacher of mine, when I explained this to him, he says, "Oh yeah, that blue globe, that was Kitiar." And I said, "Wait a minute, you mean that wasn't from another planet or another solar system? That wasn't from other those stars out there?" And he said, "Oh yeah. It was that too." And he said, that's what we do, you know. We have the ability. He said, you'll never fly to those other stars in one of those airplane things that you fly around in metal. It's too slow. And basically, he went on to describe, in his terms, what he was describing was that it's all consciousness. And that his concept of what we call the extraterrestrials, whatever we want to call them, coming here is our own consciousness changing and being impacted by that consciousness out there that's changing. And I was very struck this morning listening to Nassim that he's very much talking about the same thing, how the photons here inside of us, these little tiny particles, are connected to all the photons out there, and to all the black holes, and to all the universes. And that's very, very shamanic. And so in this book that I'll be bringing out sometime in the next year, Touching the Jaguar, I go into some detail about that experience I had, and I start by saying, you know, I think times have changed enough that I can now write about this. People's attitudes have changed enough that I'm able to write about it. And actually, also, frankly, I don't give a good fuck anymore. I'm not worried about my credibility anymore, because whatever I had, I've probably lost anyway. Either that or I've got it enough that I don't need to worry about it. But I'm at a point in life where I don't care. I'm just going to get out there. It's all going to get out there. So, we've got a few more minutes here to talk a little bit more about, so what can we each do? You got to take, it's action. And I'm going to open this, and I'm not going to tell each of you what you can do, because I don't know. You know. It's in your heart. But every one of you has passion. I know every single one of you has passion, and I don't know what your particular passion is, but I know you've got it. My passion is for writing. It's for doing this. It's for hanging out with people like you. It's for being at places like this. And that's what I do. And I'm not going to run for politics, and I'm not going to try to manage a corporation, and I'm not going to go out and try to change the banking system or any other, because that's not where my passion is. My passion is inspiring other people to do that, hopefully. To keep doing that and to keep telling stories that bring hope and that bring inspiration, hopefully, to people. That's my passion, but I don't know what yours is. Maybe it's tennis, and you use tennis as a way to show how the photons connect with each other. I don't know. You know, you're a teacher. Teach this stuff. You're a parent or a grandparent or a great-grandparent or whatever. You know, bring it into your children's or your grandchildren's lives. You're whatever you are, a painter, a house painter, or a painter of great art. Bring this in. But, you know, if we just understand that we're all headed for that same destination of creating a life economy, a system, a worldview, a human condition that supports an environmentally sustainable, socially fulfilling, and spiritually fulfilling, socially just world. If we all head for that, we'll get there. And so pick your cause. Whatever age you are, whatever place you are in life, you have passion. Bring it out. Use it. A few years ago, I took a group of about 33 people. Actually, it was exactly 33 people. To Ladakh, which used to be part of Tibet. It's an Indian protectorate, but it used to be part of Tibet. The Dalai Lama is still allowed there. And so we were there with this group of people. And on our last day, as we're flying from Leh Ladakh to Jammu, India, we're in the airport very, very early in the morning. And the Indian woman who'd done all the technical stuff for the trip for about 8 months before we got there, tried to get a private meeting with the Dalai Lama, because we knew he was in Ladakh too. It hadn't worked. We never got the private meeting. Our last morning, we're in the Leh Ladakh airport, and the Dalai Lama comes waltzing in with his entourage. I don't think he was actually waltzing, and under his arm, he's carrying my book, Shapeshifting, which this woman had sent to him, but we didn't know he'd gotten it. And so anyway, to make a long story short, he ends up inviting me to sit with him on the airplane, in the front seat of the airplane. And so I'm up there sitting with him, and we're having a conversation. And one of the things that I had heard is that the prophecy that the 14th Dalai Lama is the last. And he's the 14th. So I said to him, Your Holiness, you know, I've heard that the 14th, yes, he says, I know, I'm the last. And I said, well, what do you make of that? And he said, I don't know, but I think maybe I'm the last from the Himalayas. Maybe I'm the last Buddhist Dalai Lama. Kind of blew my mind. And I said, well, where do you think the next one will be from? And he said, well, that's why I'm reading your book. Because I think she or he might be a shaman in the Amazon or the Andes. That really blew my mind because I realized that I don't know any shamans that know anything about the Dakinis or the wrathful deities or all this other rigmarole that goes on in Buddhism. But anyway, left it at that. Well, at the end of the flight, the Dalai Lama invites all of us, my 33 people, and me, to his house 2 days later to spend an afternoon in his living room talking to him. The thing we've been trying to do for months. We dreamed it. It happened. But we actually had tickets to a museum in New Delhi on that day. So what would you have done? So 5 more, right? It says 525. They're wrong. I've been counting on that. All right, so what do you want to do? Stop right in the middle of that sentence? All right, so Ben time. All right, well, Ben time. 5.0321. So anyway, so we're at the Dalai Lama's house in his living room. He comes out and he welcomes us, and he says, I just want to make one thing perfectly clear. Don't become a Buddhist. The world doesn't need any more Buddhists. But do practice the Buddhist principles of compassion, cooperation, love. And then I get it. He's saying, you know, we don't need all this other stuff. We could go bring a shaman in from the Amazon or the Andes, and all it's got to do is be about Buddhist principles, which are the universal principles of love and compassion and cooperation. And so, and the final thing, at one point, somebody asked the Dalai Lama, so we spent the next 3 or 4 hours with him in his living room and asked him any questions he wanted. If some of them were very funny, I'd like to share it, but I've run out of time, so I can't. But anyway, so one of them, so just very quickly, so somebody said, you know, there's this author in the United States, I don't remember who it wasn't me, who's calling for all of us to take 5 minutes off on a certain date at a certain time and pray for peace all over the world. What do you think about that, Your Holiness? And the Dalai Lama said, well, you know, praying for peace, meditating on peace, that's really good. It's really important. It gets the vibration out there. But if that's all you do, it may be a waste of time. It may even be a distraction. He said, so what you got to do is every single day go out and take action to make peace happen. Pray for it. Meditate on it, send it that vibration, and take action. And I think he's the greatest symbol of that you could ask for because he meditates every morning for hours, and then he writes books and travels around the world speaking. And so I would just invite you to follow that advice. You know, let's all meditate, pray. Let's all give energy, give our heart energy, give this photon energy to the universe of creating a life economy, of creating something our children and grandchildren will want to inherit. And also, please go into your heart. And in the book, The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman, there are long lists of things that can actually give you some ideas. If you don't really know what to do, it's there in that book. But just go into your heart. Pick something that really draws your passion. And then every single day do something, even if it could be as small as sending an email, or as big as going out and demonstrating in the streets and getting your head beat in and going to prison. I don't know. Whatever it is, but take some action every day, and I guarantee you'll be happier, you'll feel better, everybody around you will feel better, everything will start to glow, The world will be incredibly beautiful. It already is incredibly. It'll just get more and more beautiful, and you'll probably be transported in a blue globe to someplace phenomenal. And I'm so happy to be joining you in this, and thank you so very, very much. Love you. Love you. Love you. Love you.
John Perkins.
Thank you.
John Perkins.
Thank you, John.